to the KAKTUS Poetry Open Mic last Tuesday of every month from Placitas, New Mexico. Jules Nyquist is handling all of the chat and other functions, which you are welcome to post things in, comments on the readers and so forth. And we will be starting with 2 poets, and then we'll have our open mic. And there won't really be a break. We'll go right into that. I'm really excited with our 2 features. And our first is going to be Janet Ruth, who is a New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Corrales, which is kind of a rural suburb of Albuquerque. Janet's an ornithologist there, and actually has just published or just co-authored a very important guide to the birds in the Corrales Bosque region. So congratulations on that, Janet. And she is also a very active poet. Her first book, Feathered Dreams, is one that I highly recommend. It was published by Mercury Heartlink Press, our good friend Stuart Warren, and it's called Feathered Dreams, Celebrating Birds in Poems, Stories, and Images. It's a beautiful, beautiful book with Janet's own drawings as well. As well as that, she has a new manuscript she'll be reading from. She's also published in a number of journals: Tiny Seed Literary Journal, Ocotillo Review, Sin Fronteras, Spiral Orb, Ekphrastic Review, a number of anthologies, and including 4 of our Poets Speak anthologies and the recent Poems and Prayer for El Paso anthology. And this book was also a finalist for the 2018 New Mexico-Arizona Book Awards. So Janet, would you like to take us away?
Okay, thank you, John. It's nice to be here with everyone tonight. I'm looking at the participant list, says there's 52 people, so that's awesome. And I am looking forward to hearing Boggs and the free open mic as well. So I'm going to start with a poem that I hadn't planned on reading until I listened to Amanda Gorman read the inaugural poem last week, and not by any means suggesting this poem is in the same league as Amanda's poem, but it was written and published in one of the Poets Speak journals, the anthologies called Survival, and it struck me that it was written at the beginning of this awful previous administration instead of at the beginning of the one afterwards. And it's a poem called Supposition for a Different Age, and it was written after Patty Ann Rogers' poem called simply Supposition. I'm going to have to change my glasses so I can read with my bifocals. Suppose the molecular transformations happening in the mind during the act of rising together resulted in a wave of shouting, clapping atoms swirling around the earth. Suppose that wave swelled in the unification of its intention, for instance, the expanding ripple from a single pebble tossed into a still pool, or the gradually synchronized tiny blazes of chemical flame emanating in response to the first firefly's glow. Suppose rising together, diverse, had physical properties and actually perpetuated itself, a solid thing. What if the shape and texture of its being rose beyond the particular places of individual risings, becoming a permanent music reverberating in the heavens, the deep, rich a cappella voices of Sweet Honey in the Rock, round and golden as the rising sun, pulsing, throbbing drums in the Osage-Sacoan camp in North Dakota, the heartbeats of the Pleiades, an atomic manifestation, the musical score for the libretto, how wondrous the diversity among birds, insects, plants, and humans, how particular the greater bird of paradise, the Madagascan sunset moth, the Venus flytrap, the transgender child whose name we do not even know. Suppose rising together diverse evolved from our individual beings by our will and actions, had its own existence. What if multicolored harlequin hues gathered, combined and recombined like a kaleidoscope transforming light, affected the rose tints on the Sandia Mountains beneath the setting sun, or caused a perturbation in the trajectory of a yellow-haired meteor flaming across our political heavens? What if rising together diverse created necessary catalysts for the tumultuous evolution of which we dream? Suppose for us to rise together, there was an element of need, as if a sodium atom sat waiting for a water molecule with which to ignite an explosion that would change the world.
Janet, thanks.
Okay, this I'm going to read now just one poem this time, amazed as you may be from the Feathered Dreams book, although I think there's another bird poem on my list. And this one is a poem called Owl Dreams, and it's placed in the book in conjunction with an essay, a natural history essay that I wrote about the Western screech owls that frequently live in our nest box and raise their families on our back porch. Owl Dreams. In the pre-dawn glimmer, the screech owl perches on her post, old woman in a moth-eaten overcoat. Soft, bouncing hoots ruffle the feathers at her throat. I slip into violet shadows. A breeze lifts the hair from my forehead. Spicy scent of wet sand sage tiptoes softly across the back of my tongue. Morning after rain smells like chai tea tastes. A thrasher croons from the rooftop, Billie Holiday husking the blues from the smoky depths of a club somewhere in Harlem. Early morning chill traces cold steel down my spine and drags me back to the owl's wild gaze. The diminutive huntress reaches for me. Beak stained with mouse blood rips into my soul. Owl and human exchange skins. I fly by instinct at midnight with terrible gaze, seeking warm-blooded prey. The plunge, the shriek, the crunch of tiny bones, the sweet horror of my fierceness, the not so gentle justice of clenched talons soaked with blood. I plummet back into my body, my human heart pounds. As the sun stirs, throws off the blanket of night, the owl's twin golden orbs flame for an instant. An owlish cry clutches at my throat as she unfurls the cloak of her wings and disappears into my dreams. In daylight and darkness, I will remember her. An iron taste rasps my tongue. And this is from a little self-published chapbook that I did with Faith Kaltenbach and Andy Penner entitled, "What is the Boiling Point of Clouds?" The poem is called Come Underground, and the title is taken from a line in Anne-Marie Nicourin's poem Untitled that she shared when she led a class here, and I was inspired to write this poem. Come underground, said the badger fetish, of turquoise marbled stone bearing spirit bundle of shell and coral peering out from carnelian eyes. She crouches, grounded, among my collection of bird fetishes. On my palm, she lies cool, dense and heavy, roots me, pulls me down, reminds me that there is another world. Below cerulean sky stitched with feathers, below earth skin of trees woven with grass and rivers, the world beneath my feet, the earth that bears me up, that will become me, welcome my bones, my more temporary flesh, that will mix that flesh with leaves and worm castings and push up something new. I'm going to read a couple poems from this new manuscript that I'm sort of shopping around trying to find a home for. Its current title anyway is Desert Alchemy, Transformation in the Southwest. And I'm going to start, I should say, in almost every reading I've done since I started doing poetry, I usually read a poem about my mother. And it's often been one of the two poems in Feathered Dreams, but this is a different one, and it's called, improbably perhaps, I Walked to the Back Patio with a Spade. And it's after Nicole Callahan's poem, The End of the Pier. It was published in a slightly different version in the Santa Fe Literary Review. I walked to the back patio with a spade. In the crepe myrtle's shade, beside the Mexican bird of paradise, I shaped a hollow, sifted your ashes into its center. Upon your remains, I settled a young peace rose, like the one in your garden when I was a child. I backfilled the emptiness, sand mixed with crumbly compost harvested from our lives, mulched with bark, watered with tears. When you bloomed back to me in heavy hues of peach and rose, I plucked you for the vase on my kitchen table, inhaled your scent, no longer sorrow. You returned again at dusk as hovering hawk moth in pink and gray wings of angel cloth, resurrected from your pupa in the earth. I stretched my hand to you, fluttered my fingers over the whirring wind of your lingering, and when you flew away again, I thought that you had left me. But you became rain. I unfurled my arms, opened my mouth to drink you, allowed you to soak into my body. You evaporated with me into silver and gold cumulus clouds boiling over the sandias, then dropped me gently back to earth. Some of you who know me know that I also have loved playing around with and learning to write in various poetic forms. And this poem is a sonnet. It's entitled Handmade Prayer. Rough, zuni hands carve stone that once was wood, compressed by ages into darkest jet. A raven peers from turquoise eyes, a flood of raindrops streams from coral clouds, inset on wings dreamt into life by fingers bent and worn from carving. Feathered plea dark-born from stone. He hopes this handmade prayer will end the drought, consuming fields of beans and corn that rustle, bleached beneath sun's blazing eye. Below, the plaza's ancient dances bring the couriers of rain. His lifted raven flies high into cloud rift, torn by beak and wings, then plummets back to earth on bolts of flame and drums of thunder, feathers soaked with rain. And another form poem, this is a villanelle, and it was initially published in the Ocotillo Review. It is a bird poem that you will figure out, and there's actually a pun in the title. The title is The Door to Night is Ajar. Above my head, an arc of ancient light flows, a river through inky pre-dawn sky. Across my view, a flash of feathered night. Twists and flutters wings in stuttered flight, trails the banner of his dark, throaty cry. Above my head, an arc of ancient light flares from long dead stars, impossibly bright, as silhouettes of shadowed absence fly across my view. A flash of feathered night sweeps the phosphorescent flames of starlight from ghostly grasp of thorny branches high above my head. An arc of ancient light begins to pale. the dying of the night. Milky river with dawn's approach runs dry. Across my view, a flash of feathered night makes one last pass to hold in memory's sight. Night jar departs. Brightening air breathes out a sigh. Above, a fading arc of ancient light, and my last view, a flash of feathered night. I'm now going to read my poem that's in a recent anthology called New Mexico Remembers 9/11, which was compiled by my neighbor and friend, Patricia Walkow. And part of the reason I'm putting it in tonight is because I'm missing an online Zoom reading from this book at the Corrales Library, which happened to be at the same time as this one. And so my poem is called Counting Backward Toward Before. We bring back the troops, put down missiles and rifles, withdraw fearful, suspicious stares from fellow humans on planes, in public places, Middle Eastern faces that could be Moses or Jesus or Muhammad. Watching television, tears roll up our cheeks, hands uncover our faces. On a morning like any other, we return to what we had been doing, eating breakfast, morning exercises, getting in the car to drive to work. And the Twin Towers swallow smoke and flames. People run backward into coffee shops, sit down to newspapers folded open, mugs of cooling latte. They jog backward to catch taxis that slowly reverse into the day. As the cloud of dust and smoke is sucked back into ground level at the towers, first responders back out, remove their gear. People walk back into buildings, help each other up stairwells, sit down at their desks, take a moment to call husband or wife or child to say, I love you, and I'll see you tonight for dinner. Fingers click on keyboards. Tourists in the street watch glass and debris rise up from pavement like dirty rain falling up. Stare as bodies flap skyward like pigeons back to window ledges. Towers reemerge, reconstruct themselves like the phoenix from her ashes. The World Trade Center is whole, and 2,997 more people are alive. As the New York horizon regains two pylons that hold up the sky, those towers expel two airplanes. The pilots of flight number 11 and number 175 sit up, lift their hands to the controls, swing their planes back toward Boston. Inside the plane's cabins, passengers refashion seatbelts. Clinking carts roll down the aisles with coffee. 5 men on each plane close cockpit doors, return to their seats, return something dark to their jacket pockets. When the planes land, all disembark. The anonymous non-perpetrators, no carry-on bags, no checked luggage, back away, disappear below the surface of the sea of Tuesday morning airport faces. We are not yet looking for someone to blame, someone upon whom to exact revenge. Back before the trajectory of history took an unexpected turn. And I'm hoping I have time for 2 poems. These will be my last 2. This one is, it's many things. I'll run through it fast. It's a sestina for you, Jules. It was written at least in part during the sestina class that Jules held this year. It is an ekphrastic poem, but it's an ekphrastic poem in response to movies, as well as artwork, as you'll see. It's going to be published in the anthology called Moving Images, which is all poems about movies. It's called Stealing Fire. The two movies are Loving Vincent and At Eternity's Gate, which, as a lover of Vincent van Gogh, if you haven't seen them, you should. And it begins with an epigraph from one of his letters to his brother Theo. But I shall always be cracked. In a vast field of yearning sunflowers, the dozen you will pick for a simple yellow vase on the table. Gauguin's fancy armchair with candle, cracked old shoes painted, propped in the doorway, scatter of crows abandons a wheat field, a night of spinning stars. Such hope in an infinity of twisted stars, such joy in the dark faces of sunflowers. Black feathered omens flying, crows against ripened grain in fields of yellow. Clots of color on old paintbrushes, omens of madness tip over your yellow chair with simple rush seat. The pairing of two chairs, two artists in Arles, two different dreams of stars and fame in your yellow house. It won't last. Paint tubes, palette, and rough easel, fields of sunflowers where darkness eases in dreams of yellow fire against violet shadows. Blue-black crows stalk among purple clods of dirt in rows of rustling corn stalks. Wait. Dark promise. The chair glows with that passion you cultivate for the color yellow. Cool yellow at center of phosphorescent pinwheels of stars. In night sky, hot color of incendiary sun, even burnt sky at noon above the fields. You paint the world, a wild poem of combustible paint, fractured, twisted, full of joy. You are the bold raven who stole embers from the blazing flower of the sun, carried inflammatory sparks across indigo skies to share with those huddled without imagination beneath small stars. To share a world of complementing colors, violet and yellow, pain and joy, oil and water, madness and revelation, yellow house utopian dreams cracked like thick daubs of oil paint dried too quickly. Yet the cracks let in the light of stars. Dark figures in landscapes, blackened wings of crows, fractures bring incandescent light to charred black hearts and burnt sienna petals of sunflowers. Conflagration of stars ignites imagination. Inferno of yellow sunflowers burns in your bequest to a world you set on fire. Sooty feathered arsonist with smoldering eye on an ochre chair.
Thanks, Janet.
And the final poem was a poem that was published in Tiny Seed Literary Journal last year. They had a themed issue. It's an online journal, but they had a themed issue about trees. And this one is called Dream of Trees, and it has an epigraph. The deepest rooted dream of a tree is to walk even just a little way from the place next to the doorway to the edge of the river of life and to drink. Joy Harjo. The deepest dream of a woman, this woman, received from the earth between my toes, received from the sky brushed by my upstretched fingers, born in the sapwood beneath my skin, is to lie even just a little while in the embrace of a tree. Not just any tree, not the grandmother cottonwood I greet on my morning walks. My dream is of the mother, the baobab, who has stood for 500 years in the Ifati spiny forest in Madagascar. Ancient being planted upside down by a god to keep her from walking. Rough-clad priestess stands, a gargantuan iron gray urn bearing the ashes and bones of the past. The one on whom, for the blink of an eye in her long life, I laid my hands. The one around whom the arms of 6 stretched, barely encompassing what she was. There was not enough time to listen. I dream of return, sharing her shade in shimmering heat with tenrecs and tortoises, scale her rough robes for the view with kuas and sifakas. Though it requires the edge of a blade, a slicing, a loss and a gain, a merging of blood and sap, I would be grafted to her girth.
Thank you, Janet.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That was
thank you,
wonderful.
Janet. And yeah, exquisite poems. Thank you, as usual. Our next poet, and glad to see a lot of good comments in the chat. So our next poet lives in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, great name, where he and his wife have an art gallery and performance space. And Hieronymus Bogs is a visual artist, a musician, spoken word artist, poet, mystic, a whole lot of things. And he used to live, I first met him when he lived up in Rochester, New York, and performed places like the Boulder Coffee, I think was the first place I saw him, with the Boggs Visionary Orchestra. And now, since moving to New Mexico several years ago, he's performed in the area. He did a workshop reading and performance at our previous playhouse, previous poetry playhouse on 5th and Granite in Albuquerque a couple of years back. And he's doing a lot of solo work, solo CDs, and also music videos and short films. And we're going to start, Jules is going to share screen. We're going to start with a recent video from Hieronymus Bogs. So Jules, would you share your screen?
Okay, I'm gonna spotlight this here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. And I'm going to play it. If there's any sound issues, hopefully you should be able to hear it. Put that in the chat or let me know. Thanks. This is about 3.5 minutes.
When I was naked, I was home. When I concealed, I became a stranger. Now I long to go back, day and night, night and day, but I can't find a way, I can't find a way, I can't find a way, I can't find a way. Did I ever leave this home in the first place? Why did I ever leave this home in the first place? When I was naked, I was home. When I concealed, I became a stranger. I became a stranger. I became a stranger.
So that poem was written in response to the video that I made. And the words to that video were written about a year before I made it into a song. It was a poem. And one day I was hanging out with my guitar like I usually do. And I had that poem that said, when I was naked, I was home. When I concealed, I became a stranger. And so what happened was I started going, when I was naked, I was home. So I just wanted to give you a little sense of how that poem became a song that you just watched in the video that you watched. I'm going to read something I've performed a lot live, usually inside of a space like a club or a cafe or a library or someone's living room. This poem is called The Portal. I beseech thee to pass through this half-imagined portal, to pass, if only for the breath of this poem, into a place where fear is non-existent, where love is intrinsic, where hope is all-consuming. I entreat thee to pass into a place where compassion emanates from the core of every object, living and non-living, emanates from the core of every action and non-action, emanates from the source that affirms only oneness. I beseech thee to pass into this place where anxious what-ifs fade, where death is the giddy continuity of life, where releasing is true possessing, and where departing is always just arriving. I beseech thee to pass, if only for the breath of this poem, into this half-imagined place. Into this place, I beseech thee to pass. So I'm going to perform a song that I've written recently in the past few weeks. And it's called You Get What You Pay For. You get what you pay for. Happens all the time. If you pay 50 cents, it isn't worth a dime. The only thing worth something you can't buy. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. You search in vain. Answers pinned to your nose. You pull at your hair and you tear at your clothes. You chew your nails right down to the bone. Get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. No more. The verdict is in. Read it on the front page. Are you listening? Or are you in denial? The world we know was conceived by an orphan child. You get what you pay for. 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 No more, no more, no more, no more. You get what you pay for. No more. Get what you pay for. No more. Get what you pay. I'm going to continue with a poem medley. It's just 3 poems next to each other. If you always follow the path, how will you know what it's like to forge your own? Or to die trying? What kind of life would it be never to thirst, to always have your fill, to boast in the end, I've always lived in comfort? How long will you wait, thumb outstretched, when you have 2 perfect feet? This song is called I Was Born. And for you guitar players, I've played before with a plectrum banjo, which is a 4-string banjo that you can play with an open tuning. And so sometimes I do songs on my guitar that I only use 4 strings. This is an open G. And I love words, and I like to have, simple tunes or simple songs to carry the words. And it helps to use instruments like that, like banjos, real simple open tuning instruments to create simple melodies. So here's a song called I Was Born. I was born when all things were one. One with all, and all was one. We had no name, could not tell, ourselves apart. Was born when all things were one, without hate or distinction, symphony of creation. I was born when all things were one. Bodies moved in rhythm like flocks of birds in the heavens. flocks of birds in the heavens. I was born when all things were one. I was born when all things were one. All things were one. All things were one. When we were born close to the earth, we knew the smell of dirt. We crawled, we walked, we roamed. We procured possessions. We built forms to inhabit, a shelter to rest in, a haven to love in, a stronghold to descend. It all seemed fitting, and it was, but eventually all things fade. Possessions fray, positions cease, sacred bonds are split. Little by little, our bodies flag and bend. With each rising and setting, we are pulled back toward the earth, close to the smell of dirt. I'm going to read 2 short poems. Please forgive me, they have the G word in them. Two pilgrims ventured up a sacred mountain. One took the ceremonial path, and at reaching the top, descended, satisfied. The other took a treacherous way, and barely reaching the top, collapsed and rested in God's ecstasy. Stop gazing into squares. God's face is round and radiant. Those are my 2 G-word poems. I don't know if there's any folks watching who don't consider themselves to be creative, and don't consider themselves to be artists, don't consider themselves to be poets or whatever you don't consider yourself to be. There's so many things. But I would recite this poem, and I wrote it envisioning my students. I was an art teacher for 15 years in New York City. And I had my students, and I would call them artists. I need artists, come up here, we're gonna do a demo, or, you know. And I was really wanting them to own the experience of making and knowing that they are these little creative creatures that make things, which I call artists. And so I wrote this little short poem that I would recite at my shows in order to try to encourage the audience to feel like, hey, that's that guy up there. He's not just the performer. Like, we're also part of this creative thing. And it's a simple poem. It goes like this. You are creative. Yes, you are. Your eyes tell stories, long novels, short poems, nonsense compositions. You explain things in ways I can understand. You teach me to see the world anew. Baby, whistling in the belly, you make me eager to hear your song. Let me just tune up this string here. And I just want to thank John and Jules and Janet, who shared some wonderful poems. There was that line about the talons squeezing the person's neck, and then the taste that was on their tongue, which really kind of stuck with me. A very powerful image. Thank you, Janet. And there were a lot of other wonderful poems there as well. So I'm going to close with a song. And I'm not sure, I think John said there might have been a time for questions. I'm not sure, but I'd be glad to answer any questions about what I do and what I shared. This song is called Foxes Have Holes. Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but I have nowhere to lay my head. To know you are rich is to know you have everything you need. To know you are rich is to know you have everything to give. To know you are rich is to know you have the greatest gift of all. You have love. You have love. You have love. To know you are rich is to know you are where you belong. To know you are rich is to know you are here, and here is now. To know you are rich is to know you and everything are one. Just one note, just one beat, and just one song. Just one string quivering. Good Solomon in all his splendor surpass the lilies wild. Oh, can you
wisdom of a child. Obtain the wisdom of a child. Oh, to have nothing but the right to be free. Oh, to have nothing, nothing. Foxes and holes and birds and nests, but I have nowhere to lay my head. Thank you.
Thank you, Boggs. That was a rich performance and provocative and beautiful. Thank you. And thanks as well to Janet once again. I was wondering if we could unmute for a second and have people give a round of applause to our two featured poets.
Yay!
Word is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Hey guys, that was great, Janet.
Emma.
Who was the